Hello and welcome into episode 16 of the Stomp the Bus podcast. I'm your host, Mark Harris, along with Colton Dodgson. And Colton, what did you do this past weekend with no Arizona State football to satiate your college football desires?
Oh, did I ever say that it satiated my desires?
Oh, I don't know.
I mean that's pretty optimistic of you to assume that. Um, no, I watched some goalposts be thrown in a river. Um, I watched what else did I watch? Oh, Utah beat USC. That was cool.
Both those games were awesome.
Yeah, I walked into a bar down the street from my house or from my apartment in I live near North Scottsdale, right? And it's maybe a mile, 2 miles from my house. And I walk in and it's like wall to wall packed with Nebraska fans. So I guess this is a Nebraska bar,
Oh, okay.
which you'd be shocked because I think it's like I don't know if this is a real statistic, but one out of every three sports bars you walk into in the greater Phoenix area, wherever you may be, is just randomly a Nebraska bar for no reason at all. So this place is just a Nebraska bar. I walk in, and this guy is just talking to me about Nebraska football, and I'm just pretending to care.
Right.
And then I just kind of embraced that. They lose to Purdue, and that was kind of the end of my experience on that bandwagon. Um,
Not a fun bandwagon to be on.
no, not very fulfilling.
Like
It's
I would not trade being an ASU fan for Nebraska right now.
or never.
In the past, sure, like in the '90s, definitely, but
Yeah, I don't know. It was just a really odd experience. Yeah, who did I watched Michigan, Penn State.
blowout.
Had the under in that one. Never want to see a team score 14 points on a pick six and a quarterback 70-yard run setting up a touchdown
Mm.
to blow your under. But yeah, that was kind of my weekend summed up, I think. I don't know if I missed any key points there. Did not watch that Stanford Notre Dame game. Honestly, I looked at the show sheet right now. And this is the first time, this is news to me that Stanford won that game, is what I'm
Oh,
trying to
okay,
say.
okay,
I had no idea.
yeah,
Completely forgot it was played. So yeah, that's cool that Stanford won that game, but I'm sure we'll get to that later. What about you, Mark?
yeah. It
What
was
did
a
you do this
was a
weekend without your satiated appetite?
uh, it definitely was a pretty forgettable game, Stanford Notre Dame, unless you're the Golden Domers. But yeah, I went down to LA actually, saw our
Oh, that's right. I forgot
good
about
friend
that.
Jacob Janauer, saw our other good friend Noah Friedman. Good hanging out with those guys. Saw my brother who lives down there, so good stuff. Was able to watch some college football when I wasn't watching the Mariners go 18 innings without scoring a run to end their season.
Hmm,
That was a lot of fun, but
brutal.
such a typical way for them to lose. But it is what it is. Yeah, no, the man, it was good seeing USC lose. I was watching that in a bar, and there were multiple USC people there, so good to see them lose, even though their offense played really well. But yeah, definitely, it's definitely nice as a fan to just in the middle of football season, you just kind of get a week off, from being like emotionally invested. And with this year's ASU team, it's a little different than say our NFL teams or good ASU teams in the past, where you actually like really do care what happens week to week. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm never really a big fan of the bye. It always annoys me.
Interesting.
I like to just obviously it's buys are extremely important to the players, but I'm always just annoyed that I have to wait
Interesting.
2 weeks to watch again.
I definitely used to feel that way, but sometimes it's just nice to kind of just on the bye week you can't lose. That's the thing. Like there's no chance of you losing. And so that's kind of why I like it as a fan. So maybe I'm just scarred
Yeah.
from past
The goal is to
experiences.
go 1-0 on the bye week.
That's right. Exactly. Well, ASU is done with its bye week for the year, or at least its first one. I'll have to look at the schedule. I think they only have one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they only have one.
Yeah. So ASU is done with their bye week, and up next, a trip to the raucous environment at Stanford this Saturday. This is not like, look, this isn't an exciting game, really. If you're looking at this game from afar, you're not like, ooh, can't wait to put away some time to watch Stanford ASU at 1 o'clock on Saturday on the Pac-12 network. But I think this game is actually a lot more important for ASU and the future of the football program than people might think. And it's because I feel like if Iguano loses this game, then they basically have it's going to be that much tougher to keep him, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah, but I feel like that's every game, except for maybe UCLA.
well,
Uh,
and that's so the reason why I do this one in particular is because this is a winnable game, you know. Like, if he loses to Colorado, then there's just no like, and hey, Colorado won too over the weekend. But then there's
yeah,
no
I mean, I think
what
they're all winnable, except for I don't know.
at Wazoo.
UCLA is
At Wazoo
tough.
is going to be tough.
At Wazoo is tough, but I'd say all of them. I mean, I don't want to say UCLA is unbeatable. They look
They're
really
not.
good.
No, they're
They're not
not.
unbeatable. I mean, if we were to power rank these in terms of like best chances that ASU has to win, I think I'd put Stanford as the second highest on that list behind Colorado. I think
Right.
I'm going Colorado, Stanford, U of A, Oregon State, Washington State, UCLA. UCLA being the most difficult,
I'd
obviously.
probably flip Wazoo and UCLA just because Wazoo's on the road, but I get your point.
That's true. I guess those two could be interchangeable, but um, I don't know. I think you're absolutely right. Any loss at this juncture, even a loss to UCLA, like Sean Aguano, we talked about it a little bit last week, but I think he's unfortunately in a situation where I can't remember who said there's some quote that's like, "Be so good that they can't ignore you," and that's
Right.
kind of the position that he's in right now. He can't just be like great. He unfortunately has to be like almost perfect
Right. Right.
to force
And
their
it
hand,
and it
and it
doesn't
might not
help.
even be enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't help that obviously these first two games were against two of the better teams in the Pac-12. I mean, the win over Washington is still huge.
Hmm.
Because I mean, if he had lost that game, then we're really not even having a conversation, like a serious conversation about this,
No.
because it gets you to 2-4, and with the relative below averageness of the opponents ASU is playing, like at Stanford is not that tough of a game. I don't look. I know that Stanford beat Notre Dame over the weekend. They won 16-14.
Where was that game played?
That was in South Bend.
Oh, okay. Ooh.
I didn't watch a second of this game. Stanford scored a touchdown. I want to say they scored a touchdown on their first drive. Yep, they did. And then from then on, they had 3 field goals and won. Like, Notre Dame's defense is better than ours, but just the lack of. I think ASU will be able to score more on Stanford than Notre Dame did, even if ASU ends up
Oh,
losing
for
this.
sure.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's.
No, what
I
were you gonna
mean,
say?
look. What were you saying?
No, I was asking what you were saying.
Oh, uh, I mean, if you're a Notre Dame fan, like that's just got to be such a kick in the balls to lose to
Yeah.
Stanford. I mean, this Stanford is still 2-4. Like they were 1-4 coming into that game. Their only win had been over Colgate. Which, hey, speaking of Colgate, good first win for ASU hockey in the new Mullet Arena.
Mm,
It's
didn't
Colgate.
even know that happened. That's
Yeah,
cool.
no, that I want to get down to a game there. That looks a lot of fun. But anyway, um, it's just this team isn't that good. They have some guys that will be able to make some plays on you. Their running back, Casey Filkins, he's pretty good. Um, Tanner McKee is a good quarterback. He'll probably be on an NFL roster. I don't know. Like, it's just he's not good enough to like totally save this Stanford team, though.
Right. I mean,
So
he'll definitely be in the conversation as like a top 2 round pick. And
top
he's
two.
gonna be one
Interesting.
yeah, he's gonna be one of those guys that definitely rises throughout the evaluation process of like the Senior Bowl and all of that.
Right.
Extremely talented.
And people
Um,
are going to be like, this guy, and then he'll go to the NFL and he'll be like a little bit better than people think, but still not like that
yeah,
good.
he might follow the Davis Mills path,
Yeah, I
and
know.
he'll play
That's what I was thinking of. Because
yeah,
Davis
Davis
Mills in
Mills
college, like,
plays the trail.
yeah, not as long of a
Um,
neck as Davis Mills, but
oh yeah. But yeah, I think as long as he goes to a better situation than Davis Mills did, this is definitely a guy that is going to be around for a little while at the NFL level. He's that talented.
yeah,
And somebody else that just I watched that Stanford Oregon State game. I mentioned this last week. But Bryson Tremaine coming back from that broken leg
yep,
last year in
he's
the
solid.
Oregon game. I think he's going to give ASU some problems. You mentioned Casey Filkins too. These Stanford has some playmakers for sure. I think it's going to be one of those games where watching through the lens of, I mean, what's going to happen at quarterback. Obviously, Iguano commits to Emory Jones.
Right.
But reading this quote, my philosophy was we're never going to penalize an injured player. It sounds like he's going to see if it sounds like Emory Jones is going to have a very thin margin for error if this offense maybe stalls out on a drive or the first couple drives. He might be quick to turn to Trenton Bourguet. I think Trenton Bourguet narrowed that gap quite a bit.
100%.
And even if I mean, it just sounds like yeah, Jones isn't going to be penalized for being hurt, which I don't know. I don't even necessarily agree with that. I think if you're coaching for your job and you're going for broke, essentially you go with the hot hand and let
Right.
that guy play himself out. I don't know. That's just my opinion. But regardless, I mean ASU is going to be in a position where they might have to. Stanford doesn't have the firepower to score like 35 points or anything like that. I don't think, but they definitely have the ability to keep the pressure on ASU's offense, and it's going to be interesting to see how this group responds after the effort that Bourguet put forth against Washington. And is Emory Jones able to galvanize those guys? I say in a hostile environment, but this is Palo Alto.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I think the biggest act of hostility there is not driving a Prius. Um, so I'm not entirely
Wow.
sure how hostile it's going to be. But
That's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
You,
gonna be my 2
you think of that
cents.
one before the show?
Oh yeah, I have a writer's room that writes all my jokes for me.
Nice.
So I'm gonna steal that one from the intern who wrote it and not give him credit because he's being paid in experience.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. So I do agree with your point that like Stanford, even though look, Stanford's not that good of a team. They're 2-4. We have a better record than them. Um, and I think. Oh no, we don't have a better record than them. We're 2-4. I'm dumb. But uh, we have a very similar type. I don't like ASU is listed as 3-point underdogs on the road, which basically means Vegas is like, okay, these teams are basically the same. Um, and that's from what I've seen this year. It's not like Stanford's. They've had one good win. ASU has also had one good win. They've both blown out the one FCS opponent they've played, and they've lost all their other games. The difference is ASU just kind of has a different vibe about it. In the wake of the Herm firing or Herm departure, whatever, firing, relinquishing of his duties, whatever it was. Uh, but and your point with the playmakers part, like ASU can't just go into this game thinking, oh, we can score 24 points and win 24-20. Like, and that's
Definitely.
how a Herm team might have played. Honestly, that's how he probably would have preferred to win. But I think ASU will be able to get some yards here. Stanford defense has been bad all year. They were bad last year. And just because they had one good game against Notre Dame, I'm supposed to believe they're fixed. No, I think a lot of that I think a lot of Stanford holding Notre Dame to 14 points is more of a Notre Dame highlights the Notre Dame weakness of its offense more than Stanford shutting them down.
Absolutely. Notre Dame is inept on offense. I've watched
Their quarterback went 13 of 27 for one touchdown.
yeah.
Like,
no, I've watched
ASU might have two quarterbacks better than whoever's
yeah,
playing at Notre Dame right now.
that's a good point. I think both Emory Jones and Trenton Bourguet right now are better than whoever Notre Dame started at quarterback. I don't even know who it is. Don't care to look either. But I think I've watched a total of 30 minutes of Notre Dame football this year, and that's about 29 and a half minutes too much. So I know enough to know that Stanford's defense wasn't a complete unit in that game. It's not like they just had all of the answers.
Right.
They were playing a team that can't score points. So
right. And maybe Stanford made some adjustments too. Like teams, defenses and offense improve and get worse throughout the season. But I'm not super worried about ASU picking up yards. I think ASU is going to be able to move the ball on Stanford. It just depends on, are they kicking field goals or are they, converting those drives into touchdowns? So we'll see how that goes. I think one thing, obviously, earlier this week, Sean Aguano basically said he didn't. I haven't seen any quote where he said like Emory Jones is 100% going to be our starter for the Stanford game. He's basically said things. The big quote that stood out to me, and I'm getting this off Sun Devil Source for the attribution, but he said, "quote My philosophy is we're never going to penalize a injured player, so it's Emory's job back, and we'll see how it all plays out." What that kind of indicates to me is that and it said in the article, Emory's getting most of the reps at practice, the first team reps, because he's healed from his concussion. So like he's cleared to play, he's all good. Had the bye week to have extra time. It seems like Emory's definitely still getting more reps at practice and leading the team. But like you mentioned, the gap is not as big as it once was, and pop-up came up, but the gap, there isn't some huge gap there. Like, and we saw how well Bourguet could play against Washington, but there is one thing I want to bring up in regards to the Bourguet performance, and it's that Washington's defense is just terrible. Like, it's really bad. And look, as someone who, again, I grew up as a Washington fan, I still kind of follow the team. Like, they're really injured on the back end, and that wasn't exactly a huge strength for them anyway. I mean, both their corners are now in the NFL from last year. So you fire Jimmy Lake, you don't get as much defensive back quality play, even though you have a better offense. But anyway, basically my point is like Bourguet did a great job. Like to step in and to come in cold. Like it was a really impressive performance, like he was making great throws and he totally just looked the part. But we have to remember that he was not going against a good defense, a defense that wasn't even fully healthy. And let's just look at what Washington's defense has done. Like this over the weekend, Washington's defense gave up 39 points to U of A at home. They gave up 40 to UCLA. Now that doesn't look quite as bad, but still not like if you're giving up 40 points to teams, that's not good. And another thing about that game is that Emory Jones, it's not like the offense was doing bad when he was in there. Their first drive, it was a field goal, and the second drive, he basically on the play he got injured, he picked up a 3rd and 6 running the ball, and then by that point they were like that got them down to like the 11-yard line or something. So like he was playing well in that game, and that's I've seen some people kind of make a side eye at or not make a side eye, but just be like question Aguano and like, hey, why are you going with Jones if Bourguet played so well? But our look into how Bourguet played this year is, three quarters against a bad defense at home. He played incredibly well, and so he deserves that. But
Yeah.
um,
Real quick with the U of A Washington score, I just pulled it up real quick. Washington was up 42-24 at the end of the third quarter. Obviously, giving up 24 points in
mm,
three quarters isn't like ideal. You're not looking at Georgia's defense, but I think a lot of times, I mean, U of A scored 15 points in the fourth quarter. That game's kind of out of reach. I think a lot of times teams will take their foot off the gas pedal. Not to say that, Trenton Bourguet went out and lit up, like I said, this
right,
absolute unit of a defense. I I mentioned it last week, but I think the most impressive part about that performance was his ability to kind of keep Michael Penix and the Washington offense at arm's length through that entire game,
yeah.
right? He could have easily made the mistake. He could have easily, and there was times in that game where ASU was forced to punt and
He did throw a
Washington was
pick, but it wasn't like a
right, but it wasn't
complete
like the
back.
back-breaking, like
Yeah,
game's tied. Now
right.
Washington
Because that
has the
game was tied. It
ball
was 38-38 at one point, and yeah,
right, and
yeah,
Michael Penix continued to score points in Washington, or not Michael Penix, but like Washington's
right,
offense continued to score, and I think that was the most impressive part for me because it takes a lot of mental fortitude to kind of compartmentalize what's happening right there with, okay, this team is top 25 in the country. This Michael Penix guy was garnering a little bit of Heisman buzz last week. Like, this is a
right,
good offense. And he was able to kind of keep them at bay and put enough separation between, you know, the ASU and Washington or whatever.
right.
But uh, we talked about that margin for error for Emory Jones, and just reading that quote that we're kind of unpacking here, that part at the end that says we'll see how it all plays out is like, don't expect Emory Jones to be able to have 85 passing yards halfway through the third quarter. We're down 10 points and he's still
Right,
playing. You know
right.
what I'm saying? Like, it sounds like this is going to be a situation like I alluded to earlier where the team knows what Trenton Bourguet did last week. Sean Aguano knows what Trenton Bourguet did last week. Um, with all of the implication surrounding, the job and the team and turning this around, it seems like it's all building toward Emory Jones kind of has an uphill battle here. I think he has to come out and play his best football of the season, which it feels like a win-win. I mean,
Right.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying Bourguet is going to come out and maybe it was just a product of Washington's defense and not necessarily him being the answer or anything like that. But I think either Emory Jones comes out, lights it up, ASU wins this game, or Trenton Bourguet comes out and ASU has some clarity at that position moving forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like is keep an eye on what happens throughout this game. Because Emory Jones doesn't have this job like locked up.
Right. Right. Yeah. That I agree with that for sure. And like, look, Aguano, this could all be gamesmanship. Maybe he's gonna go with start Trenton Bourguet the whole time.
Mm,
Because I mean, if you're Stanford, you probably have to prepare a little differently for each guy. Jones is much more of a running threat than
yeah,
Bourguet is, and so this is what coaches do from high school level to the pro level. They're trying to have as much whatever little thing they can do to make the opponent worry about something that may not even matter. Um, it's like that, when Peyton Manning, like half the things he said at the line of scrimmage were just like dummy calls that didn't even mean anything. He just said them to maybe the defense thinks that it means something when it doesn't. Um,
right. And that's an excellent point because this quote is just ambiguous enough that
yes.
Iguano could backpedal and say, "Oh yeah, it just played out differently in practice." Like, we didn't even have to get to the game to see how it would play out. And Stanford is preparing for, like you said, an offense much more predicated on Emory Jones' ability as a runner, um, and that gives ASU somewhat of an advantage. you're absolutely right. That could be an angle to this too. And it would be extremely easy for Iguano to backpedal and just say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! I never said he was going to start the game. It's his job. He lost it in practice." Something like that. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Not that he seems like that kind of guy, but this quote seems just ambiguous enough to give him the out if he needs it.
totally. And you know what? It could all be, we could be totally overanalyzing this, and it's just going to be Emory Jones, and there's no like, maybe Trent Bourguet has closed the gap, but he's still like the starter. And people might question that, but I guess Iguana wants this job, and so he's not going to just give the job back to Emory Jones if he doesn't think he's the worthy starter. You know,
Right.
like
My
it's
money's on Emory Jones starting this game, and I don't think we're gonna see Trenton Bourguet unless Emory Jones starts slow. It's not even gonna take like the train going off the rails. I don't even think Iguana is gonna let it get that far.
it'll be like
It
Jones will be like a starting pitcher, and if if he's got the bases, two guys on first and second with one out, then whatever the football equivalent of that would be. If he's just starting
yeah,
to not be as good, then before crap really hits the fan, he'll put in Bourget and see what happens. But
right.
I think
My
if
guess would be
USC,
like two two drives, maybe the offense stalls out or
yeah,
can only muster a field goal because I don't know, Emory Jones misses a throw, something like that, right? Um, and then I think he's gonna see what he has in Trenton Bourguet, and then at the end of the game, say we needed a spark, and then it's gonna be the
right,
same old routine that it always is when you've got a coach or not a coach, but a quarterback that wasn't necessarily the starter before the game, now putting himself in that position.
right, yeah. And I think Iguano's got to be could might need to be kind of careful here because you don't want either guy to go in and be pressing, you know, and so
Right.
that makes things a little more difficult. But for all we know, it could just be we look at this season and it's like, oh, remember the Trenton Bourguet game? Like
Right.
it could just be a one-off thing. And hey, maybe Emory Jones plays in this game and he looks looks like he did before he got injured, looks like he did in the first half against USC, and then we're not even going to be thinking about Bourguet if ASU wins 35-20 over Stanford and Jones has two touchdown passes and runs for another. Like then it's then we're not even talking about it. And
That's a good point. There's been a lot of
so
those games too. I mean, you look back at there was a Joey Yellen game. There was a
right,
Sterling Cole game. There was a Brady White game. All these guys who
yes,
have had to play,
Dylan
and then
Sterling Cole, oh my gosh,
yeah,
yeah.
DSC. I'm trying to think of the other guys who have
Well, there's probably a
made
lot.
that,
I mean,
but
before pre
yeah,
2015. Um,
who backed
yeah,
up Burko? Was it Brady White?
I think it was I don't think Burko missed a game because Burko started the 2015 season. I don't think he
Yeah,
missed a game.
he was Taylor Kelly's backup, but I was
Yeah,
just trying to think of who the quarterbacks were
it
on
would
that
probably would have
team.
been Brady White.
Oh, there's Blake Barnett too, ASU legend. I'm trying to
Yeah, but
think of all those
I don't think
guys.
Barnett ever played.
No, I don't mean like guys who played. I'm just trying to think of like depth charts or like quarterbacks of teams that we covered, and
Right.
those were some of the prominent names I remember.
Yeah, it's weird because Manny Wilkins just held on to
Manny
that.
Wilkins, that
Well, I mean,
was a big one.
he held on to that job from he was 2016, 2017, and 2018. Like there wasn't like nobody was good enough to surpass him, or at least the coaching staff thought so. I mean, Bryce Perkins was on that team, and now he's in the NFL and led Virginia to an Orange Bowl. So
Super
who
Bowl
knows?
champion.
And Brady White went on to Memphis and played in the Cotton Bowl too. So we had two guys who were quarterbacks of teams that went on to play in New Year's Six games. I think some of that's just circumstance. But anyway, I'm not gonna go back and relitigate the coaching quarterback decisions of the final few years of the Todd Graham era. But you know what? It's interesting that we have two quarterbacks that I think people feel like if they're on the field, they're both like competent.
Definitely,
And that's
definitely.
good because
I don't think anybody's gonna be angry that one of these guys is playing over the other.
oh, I think people. Okay, I
I
think people will be like. I think a lot of people will want Bourguet to play even more so. Like if Emory Jones has like a whatever, the offense goes 3 and out on some drive. Um, I think you'll see. I mean, look, I'm on social media a little more than you, but you'll see people be like, "Oh, time to put in Bourguet," and whatever. Like the backup quarterback for any college team is always going to be super popular because they don't you don't see them fail as often. And
right,
our
right.
experience with Bourguet this year was him being incredible and playing really well against Washington. So it's a good storyline to watch this whole season. I mean, that's the good thing about this Washington win is like this team just even though they're not going to be like that good of a team, like they're absolute like if everything goes right the rest of the year, their absolute like best case scenario going forward is going 7-5. I would say like if everything goes right, that could possibly go right, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're probably still looking at a 6-6, 5-7. But again, by winning that game against Washington and doing it and having Bourguet coming in, now you're like, oh, this team has a like 15% chance to go to a bowl game or whatever. And it's like, oh, we have a kind of a quarterback controversy. Um, so that just kind of adds a little flavor to what's been a not fantastic ASU season this far. So we'll see how it plays out. It should be. I think they're gonna just have Jones start against Stanford, and hopefully ASU maintain does well in offense, and at the end of the game, we're not even really talking about it. You know.
Definitely. I disappeared down a rabbit hole of Blake Barnett's Twitter,
Oh boy.
which is interesting actually. His header photo is ranking college football as 10 biggest busts from the 2015 recruiting class, and it's
Fine.
number 10 Blake Barnett. It's like a screenshot of the
Damn.
article. So, bulletin board material for Blake.
I do kind of feel sorry for some of these 5-star guys. Like they get this label placed on them coming out of high school, and then you go to this college, and people just expect you to be like the savior. Like,
Right, right. It's unfair. I mean, and they don't really have a lot of time either, especially if
no,
they have to start like right off the bat and they're not, like even Bryce Young had to sit for a year. You know what I'm saying?
right?
Like, uh,
Well, and if they go like he went to Alabama, if you go and like there's a Jalen Hurts sitting behind you, and you have one bad half, and then all of a sudden the other guy takes over, and it's like, oh, I guess I need to go find somewhere else. It's like,
no, that's the thing too. That's a great point. Is like in college football, all of these guys are, you go to Alabama's quarterback room, and the worst guy in there was a 4-star recruit. You know what I'm
right,
saying? Worst guy, but like. That's the thing is, if you're the best 5-star or whatever it is, and like you said, you have one bad half, it's like, where am I going to transfer to now? And then you've got a listicle calling you the 10th biggest bust in a recruiting
yeah,
class. It comes at you fast, but
yeah.
looks like
Well,
he's
and
a
it's like if you're a high NFL draft pick as a quarterback, at least you had like people saw you for the most part prove it in college. Like
yeah,
obviously it's no guarantee, but I mean going from high school to college has to be difficult as well. So it's yeah. It's weird to be like, oh, I feel sorry for the 5-star quarterback who's like great looking guy and has all the girls want him or whatever. But it's like everyone also expects you to be like the best quarterback in the school's history when you come there. Because even
right.
if you don't go to a school like Alabama or like a Clemson or something, let's say you go to a mid-tier school, like you go to a Purdue or you go to a Mississippi State or whatever, then people are like, oh, you're people, we don't usually get 5-star quarterbacks, and so you can come in and be the guy, kind of like
Yeah,
Graham Mertz at Wisconsin. He was supposed to
definitely.
be the guy since Russell Wilson at that program, and he's just been like okay, or maybe a little bit below that. Um, so it's
Yeah.
tough, but
No, it's wild, and I mean that level of notoriety between 16, 17, 18 years old your brain is not equipped at that
Right.
age to deal with that level of, or maybe any age. Like when do you ever get used to that level of expectation? And it's like Blake Barnett went to Alabama out of high school. That's like some people's lifeblood is Alabama football. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that's the type of place where I don't know, people aren't too kind to you if you're not producing the way that you should be. And
Yeah.
having to deal with that at 18 years old and go into a room with the best quarterbacks in the country and have to be the guy. It's a lot, but I don't know. It looks like he's a quarterback coach now. He's really steering into this whole like I didn't live up to expectations thing, which I think is a little weird, but
Yeah. I
I
feel like
don't
if
know.
I was that, I would just be like, you know
I'd
what?
move on. Yeah, he has
I left it
has
out
been.
there. I got a free education.
Right. He has
But
has
maybe
been
I don't know. That's just me. But
has been in his bio.
uh,
It's like I
damn
it,
that.
it, it like when you do that stuff, I feel like it's showing that it actually bothers you.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, his header photo is I was one of the biggest busts in the 2015 recruiting class,
Right.
and then has been in his bio. It's like I don't know. I feel like I'd want to just turn the page. But then again, I wasn't a 5-star recruit, so I don't know if I
It's
have.
hard. Yeah. It's hard for us to
Yeah, I
hard
don't
for us to
know if
relate with
I
our athletic profiles. But
right.
um,
I don't know if I have the necessary perspective to comment. I am a I'm a pretty experienced failure at things. And I know when I fail at something, I'm eager to turn the page and move on to something
eager
else.
to forget it.
Or
Yeah. Same.
right, turn the page and like figure out what I need to do next, not live in my failure, which that's kind of what it feels like. But whatever, hey, if it works for him, it works for him.
Right. Well, I actually have another former 5-star QB. Do you remember Max Brown on
Ooh,
USC?
that's another big one, and he does the same thing with the
No, but the
whole like
difference is he's at least like from what I can see, it feels like he's just kind of he's a college football analyst for the Pac-12 network, and he has his own like podcast, and so at least he's like, hey, I have knowledge about this, and whatever. Like, I'm gonna talk about it, and it didn't work out well, but whatever.
yeah.
And
You know
so
what? Maybe he's a little less like trying to see.
Pardo,
Yeah. Like the whole I oh, okay, you know what it was? Because I remember like stumbling on this before, and he has that Tom Brady video posted, um, and like has some commentary on it, which I remember this actually being somewhat insightful. But it's definitely interesting, to see those like college guys. And wasn't Max Brown a guy who like actually played like semi well at one point, or did he
um,
never?
I don't know. I don't remember, but I remember him being a bigger recruit than Barnett was. Like he was like number one. I think Barnett was like the fourth 5-star QB in his class or something like that. But anyway, um, speaking
Regardless,
of a team that
it's a very interesting like
yeah,
psychological. What am I saying? Psychological, you know, dilemma or conversation to have. Like, how can somebody write you off before you're even like 22 years old? It's just interesting.
yeah. Well, onto a team that is pretty unfamiliar with 5-star quarterbacks, and that would be the Colorado Buffaloes. And I know we're an ASU podcast, but the reason I wanted to touch on what happened with Colorado over the weekend is, well, anyway, they beat Cal 20-13 at home in overtime. And the reason I bring this game up is we've all year we've talked about, okay, this ASU team, it may not be that good, but we'll be able to beat Colorado on the road. And Cal fans were probably thinking the exact same thing, and they just lost. So I still think ASU should win this game on the road because I think Cal's offense is like, again, I think Cal's offense is worse than ASU's offense. Like they don't even. It's always been this way with Wilcox. So uh, I think that obviously played into it. But this game shows that Colorado is not just going to roll over every single game, And so ASU ASU can't afford to come into that game and be like, oh, we're just gonna win because Colorado sucks. If they have that attitude, they'll either lose or they'll win, but it'll just be like an ugly, like, they fall down 14-0 and they end up winning 17-20 type of game. Obviously, I would prefer that one than actually losing, but I think that game is much more losable than it was.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I was still looking at the Max Brown thing. I didn't know he got replaced by Sam Darnold. Anyway,
Hey,
that
at
I
least he
thought you
got
were
replaced by
gonna
someone who went to the NFL. So
yeah, exactly. A very storied career for Sam Darnold. Um, yeah, no, I definitely agree. I obviously Colorado seems to be the most winnable game out of these games on this schedule. They should go there. They should win this game. I think that ASU is right now. Obviously, it's hard to say because it's been, you don't know what team you're going to
right,
get regardless of who is coaching them. But I don't know. I think they're in a better state now than Cal was going into that game. I think things are trending upward for ASU. They just knocked off a top 25 team. Colorado, I mean, just won a game, sure, but they're still awful.
right,
It could have just been the perfect storm. I
and
don't really see that one
yeah,
being very dangerous at all.
and
It
yeah.
seems like just a one-off more than anything.
Well, I think you could be right, and especially since maybe now that Colorado has a win and the threat of going 0-12 is gone, then maybe there's a little like easing off the gas pedal because I mean these players know that this team isn't good. We've all been on
Right.
we've all
And
been
they
on
got
bad sports teams where you know the deal. And when you're on a team like that, you're like, okay, like we're probably gonna lose to this, all these teams, and then you look at the schedule and you see like one or two teams. We're like, okay, we need to get this one, because we
yeah,
might not. And that's probably what Colorado was doing. Grant, they also had the interim head coach, so you get, the interim head coach bump when you play a new team. But I think by ASU, maybe some of that will have worn off, um, and hopefully Colorado. I just ASU. I get that Colorado won that game. There's still no excuse for them potentially losing that game. So, uh,
yeah.
but it's not going to be quite as much of a like walk in the park as I expected a, a week ago. So,
I don't know. I think it still might be. I think all the
I
thing
mean,
they
it could
did
be,
is
that's for sure.
give you a little bit of a discount on the old spread.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, the spread for this game will be interesting to see how like where Vegas judges both of these teams. But one thing I don't really have much else to talk about.
Some O
Oh, I did
line
want to touch on a
shuffling.
few
Yeah.
things. Again, saw a few practice reports, and this was off Sun Devil source as well. So ASU looks pretty good on the injury front, but Ladarius had, jeez, sorry, Ladarius Henderson, their
Bless
left
you.
guard. Thank you. Uh, their left guard. He's probably not going to play on Saturday with the left or with a hand injury, and he might be their best just their best player. Not their most important player because he's a left guard, but just like their best or most like NFL ready player. Obviously a very good player. He's going to be gone, so the offensive line kind of getting reshuffled. You still have Isaiah Glass at left tackle and Ben Scott at center, but according to the reporting from Sun Devil Source and others, they're moving over Chris Martinez from right guard to left guard, and then Des Holmes to right guard, and then Emmett Boley, who played some right tackle against Washington and played decently well, he's going to stay at right tackle. So I guess the good thing about this is it's not like they have enough decent offensive line depth to kind of withstand a few injuries because Joey Ramos got injured very on in the year. And now Henderson's out of game. I don't think Stanford has the stingiest defensive front in the world, but hopefully we're not going like, oh man, that left. We really missed Ladarius Henderson in this game.
Yeah. O line is one of those position groups where when you don't have that cohesion like for a lot of groups, it's like you can kind of embrace the next man up thing or whatever. Obviously, there's guys everywhere that are almost irreplaceable, but there's a lot of times where somebody will step up and like perform well. Um, O line is, I feel like, probably one of the most difficult groups to do that with,
Yeah.
just because you have to be, everybody has to be comfortable where they're at. Not only that, be comfortable with the person next to them. And when you're shuffling around like that a lot and different things like that, it's hard to build that trust on the fly. So it'll be interesting. I mean, you see it happening with, obviously this is an NFL comparison, but I mean the Rams are a train wreck right now, and they're trotting out a different O line group for
Yeah.
every game. Reminds me of the Eagles a couple years ago too. I think it was 2020 where that group changes every game, and obviously Matthew Stafford's completely under siege right now. But it's the same idea with any O line. It's going to be tough to build that that chemistry on the fly. Hopefully,
Yeah.
there's not too much reshuffling and moving around, but it's a hard group to just kind of next man up it,
Right.
for lack of a better term.
Right. Right. And my hope with this is that all of these guys have played this year. Ben Scott
Right.
and Glass are still at their main positions. Martinez is moving from guard spot to guard spot. The biggest one might be Holmes because he's more of like a tackle playing right guard. But all of these guys have been on the field this year, and so maybe there's a little bit less cohesion. But remember, they've had the bye week to
Yeah,
practice too.
that's
'Cause
true. The buy
Henderson,
the buy will definitely help. And
yeah,
I mean, it's good that these guys, obviously they have the experience, which helps. It's just the concern of, okay, moving from the left side to the right side, obviously you're um like the hand that's on the ground is changing, and the way that you're moving,
right,
the
yeah.
foot you're kicking out is moving. It's just like, I remember hearing a tackle. I can't remember what level it was, but a tackle, compare it to riding with your other hand, moving from like the right side to the left side.
I've heard it being
And
compared to wiping your rear end with the other hand.
okay, well there you go, Mark. Kind of the same concept, I guess.
Yeah,
But like just that feeling of uncomfortability, is there going to be much of a learning curve with some reshuffling going on, and especially moving from tackle to guard. Your responsibilities change, all of those things. The bye week should definitely help. Hopefully that helped them build up some of that chemistry. But moving around on the O line definitely isn't easy.
for sure. And maybe one thing is that Martinez, played most of his career at San Diego State. Holmes was at Penn State. Maybe they've had them practice at those different spots before at their past schools. So maybe it's not the first time they've moved around.
Yeah,
So
that would
that
certainly be ideal.
Yeah. So ASU's offensive line, that'll be something to watch for how they play. And then this is just kind of a little side story for the game, but Aguano actually coached against Tanner McKee the past. This was back in 2016. Obviously, Aguano was at Chandler, and Tanner McKee was at uh, Centennial High School in Corona, California, and apparently Corona is one of those like nationally ranked type schools. And in
Where
the
Vontez
game,
Burfict went.
oh, he did. Okay, there you
Yeah.
go. In that game, Centennial beat out Chandler 56-49. Sports 360 AZ has this story. You guys should check it out. It's pretty interesting. And McKee threw for six or accounted for 6 touchdowns in that game. So obviously high school football a little different, but it's just that's an interesting story. I mean, Aguano has literally prepared for this guy before, so uh, who knows? I mean, I'm sure his college film will be much more important than high school, but that's just a little side
What
story.
if
Wanted
what if
to
what if Iguano just loaded up the tape from high school and watched the exact same tape?
That would not be the best way.
And that
Like that would not be the best way.
and,
But
and he talks about it in the presser, and he's like, "Yeah, we thought we had everything we needed."
No, we didn't watch any Stanford film. I've already
Yeah,
saw him at
no, we just watched
Centennial
his
back
high
in
school stuff,
2016.
and yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think he'd still have a shot at the job if he did that?
If what?
If he prepared for this game strictly by watching Tanner McKee's high school film?
Well, ASU. I mean, he'd still probably be more qualified than the last head coach we hired. So,
Ooh,
um,
wow, Mark.
am I wrong?
I don't know. I don't think Herm ever prepared with high school film, but
That's true.
yeah, I don't know.
Uh,
Yeah,
no.
hopefully it's not the
Yeah. No.
case.
That's a little interesting thing, but um, it may not even matter. I just wanted to kind of bring that up.
A
Um,
hashtag really cool fact.
yeah. Yeah. There you go. And then one kind of thought that I have that's just kind of been poking around in my brain this while we've been talking is, if you're in the camp of not wanting Iguano to be the head coach, and there are people out there that are like, I just want to go get whoever we can on the open market and see what happens, then honestly, like, ASU losing one of these next two games helps that mission, you know? Because I think Iguano has to go 2-0 in these next two games for it to be like a serious, like, actually this might actually happen of him being the next head coach.
I think it's much more microcosmic than that. Like I think it's on such a small like every move that he makes, every decision he makes in a game is gonna be analyzed. So I don't think
That's
you
true.
necessarily need to root for like losses or anything like that. If you don't, I don't think anybody is taking it to that level. I think there's a very likely scenario where Iguano could win these next two games and still not get the job.
That is true as well.
And honestly, the way that college football kind of operates, that feels like the likeliest scenario. You
Yeah.
know, I
I
think
guess
there's
my
also
point is,
there's also a scenario where he wins out and still doesn't get this job.
yeah. Well, that would be pretty surprising. But um I I guess my point is that if he goes 0-2, or really probably even 1-1 in these next two games, then I feel like there is 0% chance. Like, it just eliminates it completely.
Okay, that I agree with. I think it's
Barring,
already a slim chance, but that would drop it to
yeah,
zero.
yeah. Barring, of course, if ASU does get slammed with the whatever NCAA penalties that may or may not even be coming, um, if the NCAA does drop the penalties and they're like way worse than anyone thinks, personally, I don't think that's going to happen. But if that does happen at some point during the season, and then the admins are like, okay, well, let's just keep Iguano until we get out of this. That could be the way, but
Yeah,
I
that's a
just
scenario we talked about last week with kind of the stopgap idea.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. These next two games, I think ASU is the better team in both games. I honestly do, but they're still capable of losing both of those games. So not going to have a crazy environment when you go to Stanford. In fact, that's one of the things that kind of plays to Stanford's advantage, is like you're just going into this. I don't even want to say half empty, like three-quarters empty stadium, and there's not an atmosphere, and it's maybe it's harder to get yourself pumped up for a game. And then Colorado, there'll be more of an atmosphere there, but there's also the playing against, like, oh, these guys suck, we can just beat them, yada yada. So we'll see how these go. We'll see that the quarterback situation is something to watch for, the offensive line, and then, I mean, look, we should touch on the defense a little bit. Like, this could be an opportunity for the defense to really have a good game. Like against Washington, that's just going to be tough. I mean, they're just putting a lot of points on everyone. But even though Stanford's got some offensive weapons, Washington sacked them like 8 times when they played, and Washington's defense isn't better than our defense. So we'll see.
We certainly will, Mark. We certainly will. That was a struggle. I had to fight my way through that.
Yeah. Speaking isn't always the easiest thing to do sometimes, my friend.
Nope,
So,
he's not.
all right. Well, that's going to wrap up episode 16 of Stomp the Bus. Please like and subscribe our video. I literally never say that on the show because I always forget, but Please like and subscribe, and give us reviews on iTunes and all that stuff. All the little things that you can do to help out our small little voice base.
You're a natural salesman.
Yeah, exactly. I think being a salesperson would be the last job I would ever want to do. So.
Yeah, it was one of my least favorite for sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, with that, please like and subscribe and review us on iTunes and all that jazz. And that's the end of episode 16. Colton, you got anything to add on here?
No, just do everything Mark told you to do.
Yep. Do
Otherwise,
it.
Mark will get upset and he'll
Yeah.
kick me off the show.
And I won't be able to eat anymore.
He won't be able to afford my salary anymore either.
Yeah, exactly. So do it and have fun doing it. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up the show. Go Devils and have a nice day.